magic is disruptive. It needs to be disruptive. We don't do magic to keep the status quo. We usually do magic because we want some sort of change. And in order to have change, things need to be disrupted. Things start to move, things start to shake and change. Many people get afraid and they think, oh no, I've done something wrong. And frequently, it's not that you've done something wrong, it's that you've done something right. And now you need to let the spell run its course. But I've noticed that sometimes when these disruptions happen, people shut it down. They shut it down on some level or another. And I think it's a good idea to talk about the disruptive nature of magic so that we understand that disruption is for our good. The way I work magic is very specific to my worldview and my path, my tradition, and how I walk the craft. But regardless of whether you share my ideas about the nature of the universe, etc., your magic is still going to be disruptive if it's effective. And so I think it's a good thing to talk about. The universe's divine design includes everything that brings us happiness. We as souls are extensions of perfection. And we as egos are resistant to that perfection. Frequently, what we need when we work any kind of magic is a shift from the perception of the ego to the perception of the soul in order that we can align to that divine design and let things work out for us. Now, some people's magic is more sorcerous than others. And there's no value judgment on that at all. Either way, it needs to be disruptive if it's going to work. And when I say sorceress, I mean my will. I want it to be just like this, exactly what I say. And I want this thought form to be specifically as I programmed it. Now, there are other talks to have about the pros and cons of having that kind of a sorceress attitude with your magic. But if that is your way of performing magic, then you need to allow the disruption to be as significant as necessary in order for that to occur for you. Some of us work more on what we might call high magic, and that is, yes, we want what we want, but we're willing for it to be in the form that is most in alignment with the divine design of our lives as possible. Even then, the disruption is going to have to happen, regardless of whether it's very sorcerous or whether it's more high magic. It doesn't matter. The disruption needs to be there if you're going to have any kind of success. You have to allow that disruption to break through the barriers, break through the structures, break through the illusions that are holding the old reality in place in order to create the new reality for yourself. We have to let go of the old in order to make space for the new. There's so many times I've helped people out with their magic and they want two things at the same time that are impossible. They want change and don't want to let go of their old reality. They want to hang on to their old reality and have change at the same time. It's like adding an acid and an alkaline together. You get an inert substance, and that's what their magic becomes, inert. We have to recognize that if we want what we say we want, that we have to allow for that change to occur. In doing that, we have to release our attachments to the old, to what was. We have to let it go. And that sounds easy on paper, but it can be very frustrating to let go of so many things that we didn't realize our identity was wrapped up in. We didn't realize how allegiant we were to the old reality. When our big puff of smoke comes to start to change reality and things start to disrupt, things start to move, things start to shake, it becomes very scary for many people. But these divine magical disruptions are necessary in order for our true desires to be created for us. Calling upon the divine design is disruptive by nature. We want our ego disrupted. We want our status quo disrupted. We want everything in three-dimensional reality and in our minds to disrupt in order to make room for the new desire. One of the reasons why so many people's manifestations don't occur is because they're unwilling for disruptions to occur. All disruptions are bad from their point of view because they associate disruption with chaos, with pain, or with problem. In magic, it's the opposite. Think of the tower card. You want that tower to be destroyed because that's the old reality. It's old and worn out. It has no function anymore. And instead of that, we want something else. So we go through all the processes of deciding what we want, maybe visualizing what we want, learning the different correspondences that go along with what we want, maybe working with angels or deities associated with that, or the planets that are associated with that. We go through so much in order to create this new reality for ourselves. And then when the reality starts to be created, we say, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know it was going to be like that. I just thought maybe I'd wake up and everything would be different. We don't realize that we had to go through this shakeup. We had to go through that tower experience where the old had to be destroyed in favor of the new. When we are working magic and a disruption occurs, at first it's so disconcerting that, like I said, we shut it down. After a while, when we know that is a necessary part of it all, we put up with it in order to get what we want. But after we've been around the block a few times, we don't just put up with it. We say, bring it on. We say, bring on the disruption, bring on the destruction, bring on the lightning bolt. I want to see smoke. I want to see fire. I want dust and a total implosion of the old in favor of the manifestation of my desire. Positive, wonderful magic that we perform, as disruptive as it is and as destructive as it can be, it's also very safe. The only thing that gets harmed is status quo. You don't have to worry that you're harming yourself or you're harming another person when a disruption occurs, because that's not the divine design. Now, again, if you're working sorcery, you might have to worry about that kind of thing. That's the problem with sorcery, the way I define it. Sorcery is self-will. And there's no value judgment on it. It's not that it's wrong. You can do it, but you are so responsible for everything. You're so responsible for each and every aspect of it. Whereas when you're working with the divine design, your responsibility is in letting go of your attachment to the old in favor of the new. That's your responsibility. That's where your willpower goes. You're not responsible for creating it. You're responsible for aligning with it. The other good news about the divine design is that if you're working with the divine design, your true will, nobody will get harmed. That's why you don't have to worry about "and it harm none," because nobody will get harmed, because it's not the will of the universe for people to be harmed in order for you to have what you want. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are resistant to the disruptive nature of magic, is because they're worried that somehow they're causing harm. Calling upon the divine design is disruptive by nature. It disrupts our plans. It disrupts our old goals, because what we don't understand is our old plans and our old goals were so responsible for keeping our status quo intact. We didn't realize the old realities were created by rote, based upon mental habits that we just picked up as we walked along the way. And we didn't realize that we were creating by rote based on what we learned from other people, maybe our parents, maybe our teachers, maybe our friends, just maybe our community, fitting in the best that we could. And so when we decide, no, I don't want it this way anymore, I want something better. Let's say you're doing a health spell. You don't realize you had thought patterns that were keeping this in place. You didn't come up with it one day and say, I'm going to create a health condition for myself. It wasn't so much that, it was that you unconsciously went into agreement that there was going to be a health problem for whatever reason. And again, we're not saying that you're responsible for your health condition, that you created it for yourself, but there are thought patterns in place that do support it. And so what you can do when you're doing a health spell is to not only create the thought form and align your thought form with the divine design so that you can have the healing that you desire, but you also get to allow for that manifestation to disrupt anything in your mind, any thought forms that you've picked up along the way that help to hold the old condition in place. At first, this can be scary because we feel like our reality is coming unglued. We feel like maybe even our identity is becoming unglued. And we don't want our identity and our reality to become unglued because then we feel like we are in an unsafe universe. So the first few times especially that we go through a disruption like that, it seems like we want to put the brakes on it. We get to the point, though, with magic where we look at those disruptions differently. And like I said, we say, bring it on. And it's like getting buckled in for a roller coaster ride. I cannot wait to see how this disruption occurs because I know not only will it have been a fun ride, but at the end of this ride, I get what I want. I get what I want. And so no longer are we resisting it, saying, oh, it's going to be so scary. We're putting our hands up in the air and saying, woohoo, bring on the disruption. We love disruption. And what happens is, as we learn to do this, we learn to turn within and embrace our inner guidance so that at each turn during the disruption, we are not only being encouraged to stay the course, but if there is anything that we need to do in order to help things along, we are shown, we are given that information so that we can have what we want and we can let go of the old patterns. Problems tend to arise in our lives when we make decisions disconnected from our Creator. When we start to make decisions all by ourselves without consulting that inner guide, it's not that we're bad. It's not that we're sinning. It's that we are creating a private world. We are trying to create our own private world that is disconnected from any wisdom, that is disconnected from our source. And that is the way that we create our egos, is we come up with our own ideas, our own goals, and we are private with it. These little private ego-driven worlds that we create distort our own alignment with the divine design. And collectively, these egos form what I call the Demiurge. Now, the Demiurge is a pattern, not an entity. It describes humanity's tendency toward making decisions without aligning with our soul, without aligning with our guidance and our Creator. When we do that, we are creating personal, distorted worlds that interact with one another in a shared space, forming a collective reality that's very different from the Creator's plan for us. We create what I call a false world, shaped by the Demiurge and shaped by our individual egos. And this false world that we live in is a world of projection. And this world can never satisfy us. So when we are doing any kind of magic to create positive change, this false world has to be disrupted so that we can catch a glimpse of the true world. And the true world is where we get to have what we want. There's this interim world that we start to live in as adepts, which is not fully the world that we are going to wake up in and we're all one happy family living in glorious paradise. But it's different than the world that we were living in, our own self-created hell. So now we're living in a world that is closer to the reality and where we get to start having what we want. But in order to do that, we have to disrupt that private world of ours. We have to disrupt and allow to be disrupted those private living spaces that we have, so that we can stop being so private with ourselves and share our experience with our Creator, share our experience with the divine design and with that inner guidance. And that shared experience that we have with the divine design, with our inner guide and with our Creator, become a shared experience with other people, because we can't live in a vacuum. So when we are doing this magic that I'm talking about, even to do something, like I said, to create a condition in your body, or maybe to get a new car, to get a new home, to get a new job, whatever you want. All those spells are great. But then instead of it just being about you and your job, you and your home, you and your car, you and your body, doing what you say you want, creating another new private world for yourself that isn't going to end up making you happy, When we invite the divine design in to that whole operation, not only do we get what we want, usually in a form that's so much better than anything we could have come up with on our own. Not only do we have that, but then that inner guidance and the divine design start to open up our world so that other people benefit from it as well. That happens in a way that we couldn't have come up with on our own. Living a life that is absolutely joyous and free, and allowing that joyous and free life to be a blessing to everybody around you. And that's the whole idea of living outside of this demiurge, living outside of these ego-driven worlds, and realize that there's another way to live. And that other way to live for us is a magical life. And that magical life is inherently disruptive. And that's a good thing. In occultism, we call overcoming the ego adeptship. An adept is somebody who's aware that they have an ego but is not controlled by that ego anymore. And by breaking free from ego-driven habits and embracing inner guidance, adepts feel empowered to inspire change, challenge norms, and create more meaningful lives. You don't have to go out and preach this. In fact, that's usually an ego-driven thing, unless that's part of your path, is to be a teacher, which is fine. But that's not what we're saying, that you need to go tell people about this. It's that you live a magical life. And when you live a magical life, you inspire other people to live their own version of that magical life in whatever way comes up for them. You are an inspiration just by you being you, just by you living as an adept. You make the world so much better. Now, magic is a tool that we use to address unacceptable situations in our lives. And when we focus on major issues, our spells open up pathways for rapid change. And remember, rapid change is usually accompanied by temporary disruptions that signal the arrival of our desires. To say, I want my desire without the disruption is like saying, I want my cake without baking it, or my thirst quenched without drinking water. It's not going to happen. Believing that you can have change happen without disruption is a fool's errand. And you don't want to be caught on a fool's errand, because then you're back on the ego's hamster wheel, where you're running and running, trying to make something happen that's impossible. The ego is always promising us the impossible, dangling a carrot in front of our face, telling us that we can have what we want without any disruptions. That's not what we want. We want the disruptions. We want the disruptions because we want what we want. And when we can start learning to live our life on the edge of disruption all the time, we're living in ecstasy. We're living a life of freedom. We're living a life of joy, and we're living a life of success. These disruptions clear away everything that needs to change. And that's what contributes to our peace. That's what contributes to our joy and our vitality and our satisfaction. How about always not just working on prosperity or working on your relationship or working on whatever, but actually having what you want? Well, you can't do that if you're unwilling to have the disruption. The idea that the disruption is going to bring pain comes from the ego, not from the soul, because the disruption is not going to bring you pain. When you have a condition in your body, like when your fever breaks, that's a disruption. When your fever breaks, it's disruptive, but you feel better. So we want to disrupt the pain. We want to disrupt the negative circumstances that you're trying to overcome. We want to disrupt the conditions in our lives. We don't have to do magic for the purpose of disruption. We have to do magic based on what we want, but allow the disruption to occur. It'll happen organically. And don't protect against that disruption anymore. Manifesting a life of true fulfillment requires letting go of all of those attachments to the old and embracing the new. And by allowing our inner guidance to shape our decisions and welcoming these new transformations and disruptions, then we align with the higher purpose we have asked for. Whatever it is that we want, there's nothing that's too big to ask for. Now, obviously, we need to work within our sphere of influence because we have to make sure that we have faith that what we desire can come about. If you don't have faith that it's going to happen, then you're just spinning your wheels and working a fantasy. But if you're working real magic, it has to come from faith. You have to have faith that it will occur. But having faith that it will occur is the catalyst to make it occur. And you know that it's going to occur because the disruption happens. Something breaks open. Something happens. Can you imagine a little chick inside of the egg saying, I don't want to crack the shell, and never coming out of its shell? It'll just die in there. So it has to go through that violent moment of breaking through the shell. Same thing with a birth. When a baby comes forth, it's a disruptive moment. But we don't want the baby just to stay in the womb and never come out. We have to have those disruptions, to welcome those disruptions. Because if we don't welcome the disruptions, then we are saying status quo is really all I want. But if you want status quo, then why are you casting a spell? All you want was status quo and you don't want any disruptions, then magic's not your thing. Because magic's all about change. The journey to overcoming our status quo and embracing the change that is our birthright is one of growth, awakening, and profound connection to the divine, and a willingness to have breakthroughs, to have disruptions. And we don't have to go and look for the disruptions. They'll come find us, but they're beautiful disruptions. They're fabulous disruptions. The only reason why we are afraid of them or we think that they might be bad or scary is because that's what the ego's telling us. This is going to be scary. It's going to hurt. It's not going to hurt. The only thing it'll hurt is the problem you're trying to overcome. It'll hurt the debt. It'll hurt the poverty. It'll hurt the disease. From the point of view of the ego, yeah, it's very painful. But from the point of view of you and your soul, it's the first pleasure you've experienced in a long time because you finally get what you want. And isn't that a wonderful thing? Reminding ourselves that by nature, magic is disruptive, and we want to welcome those disruptions. And when those disruptions come, they herald the change that we are asking for. And that is our birthright. And we don't want to forego our birthright because we've swallowed this false notion that disruption is painful or disruption is scary. Instead, we want to rethink things and recognize that disruption feels good and disruption is everything that we want in regards to our spell manifesting. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I so appreciate you. Until next time, blessed be.